Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Monday. Happy Mother's Day to any mothers out there yesterday. I hope you had a great weekend. This is Let's Build Daily. I'm your host, Chris Carolin. Things are starting to get busy, uh, busier than normal, it would seem. So I contemplated, taking a break from this daily show. And then I woke up this morning and was ready to go. So, simple versus complex has been on my mind a lot lately because I keep on running into the keep it simple mentality and strategy when we are trying to explain and build complex systems, complex processes, complex customer experiences for the human condition, which is very complex, both inside of our organization and outside of our organization. So while we may be able to get away with some simplifying of, the what and the why, once we get into the how, without understanding the complexity, without understanding the how, it is pretty much impossible for a CEO or other leader in an organization to resource it properly. And I believe that's one of the primary jobs of, the leader of the organization, is to make sure the organization is resourced to achieve the goals that it has. So when we hear about growth goals and doing things differently, the amount of change required, the complex systems that need to be put in place, cannot be simplified to a single slide or 3 slides just because we only have 5 minutes of the board meeting, or we only have, this much attention span, or we don't want to, we've heard all the excuses. But when, like, for anybody that wants to put these systems in place or suggesting this change, it's your job to communicate effectively why and what is needed to do it. And if you can't dive into the complexity in a way that can get the message across, right? First of all, I would just, strike from the mindset like that the CEO or leader doesn't have time for this or isn't willing to sit down and go through complex information, right? What they're not willing to do is just sending them a complex as hell slide and then figure it out themselves. They're not willing to do that, sure. But they are willing to sit down and spend time on anything that they think will be valuable, to help them do their job in helping everybody else get the job done for the company and for their customers. So, so that's where this is coming from. And, for me, it's not hard to tie it to a lack of CRM, adoption, like entire industries still using spreadsheets, in a 25-year-old category. Digital transformation initiatives failing at a rate of 70%, plus or minus, depending on which study you look at. And so often this is because nobody's really explaining this properly. We purchase a tool like HubSpot, Salesforce, name any ERP, and then we expect that to just handle things. And that's not how it's working, right? So when, we talk about why, and then as agencies or providers, we want to get paid for a job well done. We want to get paid for the hours we put in and the value we're providing. Yet this is a constant struggle because people don't understand why they need to invest this time this money, this effort with expert partners to get this job done, right? They've tried to buy tools. They've tried to even buy, people who say that they can provide quick wins, and they've gotten burned year after year after year, right? So how do we getting to the heart of that is what drives me on a daily basis. So to kind of paint the picture for where that has come from, basically ever since maybe 2014, right, when I graduated from lab manager to director of sales and marketing, and was king of the spreadsheets, while making all the formulations that we had to make, and I had to approve all the quotes, like, can we do the thing or not? It's a very customized commodity, which means there's like no sales process except for just figuring out the technical details of the product, right? And then if it's a yes, then all right, give me a quote so I can buy it, right? That worked. I was one guy. I was the only one that had to manage the spreadsheets. So a domain of spreadsheets worked for me, but as soon as I left the role, it stopped working for the business. And that's when I, started learning about HubSpot, and realized that situation needed to be remedied if we were to, really move forward with customer experience focus. So ever since then, I've been building knowledge, trying to understand things. And it led to a day in 2020 where, now this is not it, but this is where the thought process started. Like, this is what I was selling, as I was joining a new team. Like, ultimately, I believe almost every business could and should end up here if they're trying to provide a modern, buying experience, a modern customer experience. And obviously Shopify is a specific instance of e-commerce, but the idea is you have a primary website with product pages, your product catalog, basically a sales 24/7 salesperson, answering questions that customers are asking about the products and services you provide. With that, you have an on-demand academy, not unlike HubSpot Academy. You have a store where you can buy stuff, the little things that we don't want to have to send credit cards via email to do, which people still do that. And then an online community of some sort. Now, in most cases, it's pretty hard to do this. So this might take the shape of like Slack or LinkedIn, or, there's even some Facebook groups. I say there's even, clearly I'm not a Facebook user. So, but I know there's lots of communities that have been built over there that are successful. But the key is, if it's over there, if it's in these other places versus being in your space that you own underneath this your web presence, on your online real estate, if it's on your space, then you can easily bring engagement and behavioral data, into your customer portal, right? Or your client portal. And being able to bring all this data is kind of the endpoint that everybody would love, but everybody thinks is so hard. In reality, the time it takes and the cost to get here using a platform like HubSpot is not nearly as much as you've been sold before. So this is basically the CX, platform that you want to create, and that needs to be supported by RevOps. So RevOps, in this case, we're just looking at HubSpot with an ERP, and we've got all our records. And, some of these might be new. But the idea is that throughout the journey from contact creation to customer success, so fulfillment, training, I don't have tickets on here, but service stuff, right? That's all. That obviously that gets easier to manage and align if it's in one system like HubSpot. And then if it's in there, we have this free flow or intentional flow of data that we can report on very successfully all together and differentiating between markets or whatever key, verticals we might be targeting, key accounts, stuff like that. And then we're feeding that back into, the web area so that it can provide these contextual experiences in all of these places. Contextual as simply as, hey, you bought this last time, you might like this. Hey, you're taking this course. Oh, with this module, you'll need this. You might need to buy this product. So here's a link to the store. Here's some related, community threads. Having all that is a lot closer as if you're a HubSpot user than anybody can imagine. Just because the CMS in Content Hub is right on top of HubSpot. And, it's interesting looking at seeing different, client portal proposals out there. And so much of it is related to like permissioning and, building out all this infrastructure. And I'm trying to figure out why it needs to cost so much. Because in the CMS world, the world where you're using HubSpot CMS and the CRM, it just removes the need for so much developed infrastructure. It's crazy, right? And simply because you're choosing to use this setup, like ultimately that's why the difference between a free WordPress and a monthly cost to HubSpot can pay huge dividends and is well worth the money spent if you're executing in this way. If you're just trying to build, a catalog site with none of this, then yeah, maybe it's not worth the spend. But if you do spend, now this becomes within reach, right? But not without resources to manage it, right? That's where like, okay, you love this idea. This is just kind of surface level what we want to provide. Now here's the system. So if I'm a HubSpot, which I am, a partner, I could just sell you on this idea, right? We want this, so we're going to implement this and we'll integrate it with this. Wham, bam, done. Nope. Not how it works. That's what I tried to do. That's what I tried to do internally. Got the budget, was able to hire teams, but then when it came to actually executing, got stopped in my tracks. Learned a lot while that was happening. But the reason I could get the buy-in was not necessarily this diagram. It was this one, and this is the deer in headlights one. I'm sure the other one might create some deer in headlights too. But this was basically everything. I'm sitting there in 2020, and I've been thinking about this diagram, basically, all of the things in it for a number of years since I met HubSpot in 2017, and they ask you answer and story brand. And I'm like, man, there's a lot here. Like if you want to achieve that stuff, and then move it through the organization. Not even that part. I didn't even know the moving it through the organization part. I just wanted everybody to get it and, hey, here's a diagram, do your part, right? That's not how it works. So one of the learnings is like this. And when I talk about creating a common language, a foundation of common language, stuff like this that we can create and then bring everybody back to, like, no, this is what the word means in this context. Are we still agreeing on that? If not, that's okay. But here's how we have to change, right, to support the new definition, right? So this is a starting point. But when you can sit people down, especially leaders, for 15 minutes, I've never had anybody sit down with me and say they didn't get it after that, right? So we're going to roll through it, and always taking it from the top of, there's so many different ways to think about this, or to represent the buyer journey, but that's where we started, right? So unaware, in this case, unaware, aware, consideration, evaluation, decision. And I can tell you the other thing, that when you're able to paint this picture like this versus verbally, right? When I can put this next to every other diagram that might exist in the business and show that those diagrams all stop at closed won, right? And then you got this big, you're asking me to do customer marketing, but your diagram ends here. There's literally no place on your diagram to talk to customers, right? It's literally half. And arguably, it should be more than half, right? If we also say that we understand the concept of it's easier to generate revenue from a current customer than it is a new customer, right? Resell, upsell, cross-sell campaigns need this space to be understood and resourced, right? And instead, we just know that we should be able to get revenue from our customers. So we task service teams and service leaders who they've never been asked to do sales before, and now they have revenue goals. Tell me how that's going to work. Why would you think that would work? So starting with this journey. Now, if we are, okay, so just as a reminder, we want to be number one resource. We want to be the best partner. We want it to be easy to buy from us. We want it to be easy to be successful with our products, right? So in this case, what is the first experience or interaction somebody is going to have with us as a business in 2024? Maybe not in 1995, but definitely in 2024. Content, right? And you're going to hear this as our website, right? But what is on our website? Our website has content on it. And if it's not the right content, if it's just a product catalog, right, it's not going to do the job we want it to do, right? So that's the first level, right? That's the first place that they are experiencing our business, whether that be our people, our products, our services. So if we dive in here, it goes based on stage. So we've got, podcasts and shows, industry buying guides, maybe research reports, some they ask you answer style articles. And really, it's not hard to make the case for a lot of this stuff being able to impact the entire buying journey, right? But when you can kind of hone in on the focus, at least at first, and say, okay, if we start with this stuff, now we're actually driving, our sales cycle forward a little bit faster. We're helping the sales team. So we can start creating content immediately. We can start creating content that might have an immediate impact and not have to wait 6-12 months, because we now have a new page on the website that our salesperson is comfortable sharing with somebody, knowing that they're not going to get lost when they click off the page immediately. Right? So first level is content, including stuff like feedback surveys. Feedback surveys are content, and the kinds of questions you ask and the way that you ask them matter. And they might change from here to here, right? You might want to apply them, to the content itself. How did the webinar go? Did you get the information you needed? What else should we be talking about? Right? So all these are content, is all a mechanism of asynchronous communication, that if you don't have it, you will not be having a conversation with anyone outside of a sales meeting. Right? So this whole concept of LinkedIn being, 24/7, 365 trade show, which I firmly believe, if your people aren't on LinkedIn every day, ready at the table or ready at the booth or walking around the show floor talking to people, then no one is talking to them unless you have content. So that's step one. And what's missing here, and what's missing throughout this diagram, and the reason, well, I think what I was doing was at least painting a picture that could send the message of, we need way more resources than you thought, right? There's a lot involved here, but exactly which resources, when, and what are those resources focused on is missing from this diagram. And I'll show a couple spots where that's the case. But okay, so we've got content. We know we need to make content. Content needs a place to live. And by all accounts, the most important place for it to live is your website. That's digital online real estate that you own. Right? It's something that I need to transition to with this show, because it's so easy for me to get on LinkedIn and start talking, and it's content creation and distribution at the same time. Well, I don't think LinkedIn is going anywhere anytime soon, as they continue to test the algorithm and all this stuff. I don't have control over how people see this content unless I'm sharing links directly, with them. And since I'm sharing links to this content on LinkedIn, I'm not seeing whether they went or not. And if they did go, how much time do they spend? Right? Is there any CTAs around that they could, click on? Right? A lot less control there. So if I can bring it to the website, now I have a lot more control. I get a lot more data that can then feed, the portal like we showed before. But what's on the website, and I think a way to think about this, could be, we're doing one-to-many consultation and education, prior to the sales process. Usually as we get in and onboard people, we're doing one-to-one consulting and education. And then after that, we're building customer success, and we want to promote customer success. All right, we want advocates and promoters. So again, content rich, as if a salesperson could answer all the questions, right on the website for the products and services. Then we have our academy. And, if you've ever been into the HubSpot Academy, it's not all about just HubSpot products. If it was just about HubSpot products, we would not be as successful with HubSpot as we could be. So in industrial, in manufacturing, there's all these opportunities for a lot of what you know and do on the daily. That might help somebody else out in a very similar operations management role, for example, to see how you're doing things, right? So safety checklists, QCs, you think that all of these things are out there and available. They're either not, or maybe they are, and people don't know about them. So even if you're the one to share the links to this stuff, at the very least, that's part of becoming the number one resource. So focusing, definitely first place to start is the how-tos of your technology and your products and your services. Because that, and just think about it from the perspective of, yes, we're taking our user manual, we're taking this quick 5-step process, turning it into a quick start guide, and here's a video. Yes, that's great for onboarding, but in reality, it's one of the best ways to explain stuff during the sales process. Like, this is like showing what's happening. This is why we say it's so easy to use. This is why your engineers should not be pushing back on the piece of paper that they're looking at. Like, this is really how it works, right? So we think about all these pieces of content, and if you just switch it to understand how it can be used during the sales process, all of a sudden the ROI can come much quicker, right? And if we're serving up, and if we have this level of content, it's on the website, we can serve it to the different groups that we want. Because overall, the part that gets super overwhelming, if we're not overwhelmed already, is the fact that we need to try and do this for all the different audiences. And maybe we should only have 3 audiences. But if the goal is this is where, if leadership has a goal of growing revenue in 8 different markets, well, we need to talk to 8 different audiences then, possibly, right? And knowing that going into this, using a tool like HubSpot that can use all the data in the CRM to easily switch content based on who we're talking to, that's powerful. If you don't have that, then this requires full teams of people for each market to accomplish what we're looking at. And that is overwhelming. And so that's why businesses aren't doing it, except for the top, the top 1% of businesses that have figured this out. And that's why they're so far ahead of everybody else. It's not because they have the resources. It is because they have the resources, but it's because they understand which resources they need and when. And that's strategy. That's not big. That's not big bank accounts. So it's on the website. We got to get it out there. Marketing and sales campaigns. Paid media. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Right, paid media, LinkedIn and Facebook ads, industry publications. This is usually, like most of the companies I've worked at or seen, industry publications is just relied on heavily, right alongside events, right? So again, now these, line up with this part of the journey, right? But then they can all be used with a customer focus in mind. So like VIP events, partner events, right? But you have to understand this initiative first, like, and what it entails, right? You might show up to an event completely differently than you would if this was the goal over here, consideration and evaluation, right? Which this is always the goal. And then we just throw VIPs in and we treat them the same way. And like, it's not going to go down the way you want it to. So then all of this, we can apply all of these different metrics, and there's qualitative and quantitative. There's outcome and output. And this is where every organization is different, depending on what you can do and when and what tools you have and who's in the building right now versus who might come later is going to determine what you can successfully measure from the get-go. And if you haven't done any of this, output is not a bad metric, because when you hear stuff that says consistency is a powerful thing, and is almost more important than quality sometimes, according to content. One of the only ways to measure consistency is, are you showing up? Are you creating the thing every day? Are you creating the thing every week? Right? So having some output goals as you first get started on how to do this is very, very important. So that takes us to the actual internals of how this stuff needs to work. And I'm going to call this a part 1 for today. And then we'll pick this back up tomorrow. But the key is, this is what staying top of mind looks like in 2024. This is the only reasonable way to accomplish it, with all these pieces having to talk to different audiences. And yes, it makes sense to start with one and get good at it. But when you start with one, and you might do it in a WordPress or using spreadsheets, you might get there with the one, but then you're not in a position to scale it to the other 7 in this case, right? But even the other second one, right? When you start with number 1 in a platform like HubSpot, now all of a sudden, a couple flicks of the switch, updating the data, right? Adjusting the content here and there, like how we build the videos, like modularizing your videos to be able to, get 80% product info and then 20% application, and just, replace the 20% for your different markets. There's ways to do this that are less overwhelming. But when you haven't done any of it, you're not getting away from boiling the ocean here. So instead of running away from that, think about how much more heat can I apply to start boiling some water somewhere, right? So hope this is helpful. I've had a lot of good feedback on this over the years. People inside and outside of the ecosystem, and just this is a complex beast, man. Keeping it simple is not going to get the job done here. It clearly has not gotten the job done when we have digital transformation failure, CRM adoption failure, right? It's not the tools. It's the understanding of what's required. And if you think your marketing coordinator is just going to put that extra hat on, whether it be, RevOps admin, or, hey, we don't need to rely on our third party anymore to develop the WordPress website. We're going to bring that into HubSpot. Hey, HubSpot admin, you can manage the website now, right? They can admin it, but they can't get all this content done. They can't make all these pages look great. Let's be real here. And I'll say, when I'm from the inside, I was wondering why none of the consultants were getting through the wall of industrial manufacturing when everything made so much sense. Now that I'm on the outside, I can see exactly why. We're using SAS language. There's no common language. There's no foundation to have these conversations about. So we resort to what's easy, which is lead gen and outbound magic that doesn't work anymore. Doesn't work in the sense that if you have this whole picture in your mind and you're not doing any of it, almost anything on here you start doing, you will see some kind of results. Whether let's talk about, cold emails and Google ads. You will put in money and time and effort. And if you do, let's say 1,000 hits of each, you're almost certainly going to get one or two. Now, the time and effort spent on that, what if it was spent somewhere else in this space? That's what we mean when we say it doesn't work anymore. If you're not spending time on LinkedIn, you're not building content for your website, you're not creating better experiences for your customers, all the other stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you get the one or two sales. You could be getting 10, 20, 30 if you put time into this other stuff. And that one or two, it's not looking good going forward. It's going down to 1, going down to 0.5. It's because as customers, as buyers, and you are that consumer outside of the walls of your business, you want stuff like this. You want to be able to do your own research. You don't click on the Google ads. You scroll down to the organic, right? You try to get the information until you're ready to interact. And if you don't get the information, you don't find what you're looking for and you move along. We don't want our buyers to move along. We want to be the number one resource. So this is like, customer experience piece. What's underneath is the RevOps piece, and we'll take a look at that tomorrow. Until then, find the opportunity here and let's grow. Have a great week, everybody.